Good afternoon, Barnard community. My name is Lisa Ye. I'm the Senior Vice President of Development and Alumni Relations and a proud parent of a 2019 Barnard graduate. I joined Barnard over 5 years ago and have the privilege of working with the Development and Alumni Relations team to engage our community of alumni, parents, and friends, and to secure much needed resources. I am proud of all that my department has accomplished and continues to accomplish with the support of our community every day. I appreciate having each of you join us. It has been a busy and exciting time on campus as we celebrate Sion Beilock's presidency and prepare for the arrival of Barnard's 9th president, Laura Rosenberry. I've been able to spend some time with her and since the announcement. She's impressive, warm, smart, and engaging. And I know she is looking forward to meeting you and all of our alums and parents soon. It is now my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jennifer Rosales, Vice President for Inclusion and Engaged Learning and Chief Diversity Officer. As a member of the President's senior staff, Jennifer provides strategic vision and leadership in cultivating an inclusive campus by advancing a holistic approach to institutional learning. Through the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, she proactively develops and implements policies and programs that educate and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion as core values of the college. She oversees the Center for Engaged Pedagogy, referred to on campus as CEP, which she previously served as the inaugural executive director. The CEP develops new teaching and learning initiatives, diverse learning contexts, and opportunities for interdisciplinary collaboration. She also supervises the Office for Community Engagement and Inclusion, guiding and expanding the college's commitment to working with its neighbors and the city. Formerly, Jennifer was the Director of Research and Evaluation at the Center for Social Justice at Georgetown University. Jennifer received her PhD and MA in Media Studies and her BA in History from the University of Southern California. I am honored to have Jennifer as a colleague, and it is my great pleasure to have her join us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Rosales.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello and welcome. I'm going to share my screen now. Here are my slides, and now I'm going to enter full screen. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm so excited and humbled to be able to present to all of you today. I'm going to kind of talk through some of the work that we've been doing and some of the thinking we've been doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion at Barnard. I've been in this role since March of 2022. And as Lisa said, I've been at Barnard since September of 2019. So I thought I would start in a bit of a strange way, but I thought I was going to start with what DEI isn't. So what are some of the pitfalls that I like to avoid and I like to name when thinking about this work? And so one of the things that I always ask myself is, am I ensuring that the work is not a constant crisis, right? So DEI can sometimes be used as a way for managing eruptions rather than thinking about how we can support our community in systematic ways. It's also been seen as a public relation, right? So something to promote an image or brand, but there is no structural or capacity support behind the work that's being done. We've also seen it as a commodity. So this percentage of students come from here and this percentage of students come from here, but not really thinking about what that means and how that contributes to our community. We've seen a lot recently, but DEI being posed as a threat, right? So it's a way to pose challenges to things that people would say used to work well. And we don't see it that way, right? We see diversity, for example, as being one of the reasons for the excellent academic community that we have. We also see DEI positioned as a lack. So thinking about DEI as ways to close achievement gaps, rather than thinking about what is the affirmative way that bringing in diverse people and different capacities and support can really benefit our community. The other thing that we try to avoid is moral persuasion. So thinking about empathy and grace and love as a way of doing this work without really thinking about the hard work or the participatory justice that needs to be done to get this work done. And then the last thing I want to mention is just thinking about DEI as a generalization. So thinking that oppression happens to all people with marginalized identities in the same way. We know that's not the case, and we know that doesn't happen at Barnard, or even conflating what diversity, equity, and inclusion as three separate terms can mean. So these are things that I like to think about and I like to ask as I'm thinking about the work that we do here at the college. And so my background, I guess, as a critical humanist is always to think critically before moving forward. So what is it that we're trying to achieve here? Well, I'd like to call on scholar activist Bell Hooks and the work that she has done, which is really how do we create, how do we sustain a beloved community here at Barnard? And so she says, beloved community is formed not by the eradication of difference, but by its affirmation, by each of us claiming the identities and cultural legacies that shape who we are and how we live in the world. So what is the work that we are doing at Barnard to create this? Well, our office, the DEI office, is committed to three things here. So one is helping all students fully engage in learning, which we know is the mission of the college, while supporting them to develop the tools to responsibly shape a just and equitable society. Two, so thinking first and foremost about the mission of the college and the students. Three, thinking larger about the whole climate of the college. How do we create that climate and community of belonging where everyone feels accountable to one another and doing this work? And then three, thinking about the proactive leadership that has to happen to guide the college into ensuring that there is a DEI lens and really all the decision making and all of the thinking about the work at Barnard. So I thought for today, I would talk about 5 strategic priorities that we have really focused on within the last year. And I just want to name for you really quickly, when thinking about strategic priorities, I think what makes this work so exciting for me and what makes Barnard so special is that teaching and learning is right up there at the top for DE&I. Often what you'll see in college campuses, probably in corporations, is that diversity, equity, and inclusion gets tacked on sometimes. It's seen as something outside of the integral mission and focus and work of the school, but that's not the case here at Barnard. At Barnard, we're really trying to harness the amazing, incredible work that's happening through the work of our students, through the work of our faculty, through the work of our community, and incorporating it into the work in the classroom. So that's one. Two, thinking about the campus climate, belonging. How do we think beyond just the classroom about how students live and learn together, about how faculty do scholarship and engage with one another, about how staff and faculty and students all interact and create the incredible campus experience that we have. The next one I want to talk about is studying the now, which is really thinking about programming beyond the classroom. So what kind of co-curricular experience can this office help support? I'll then talk a little bit about community engagement. And then the last one, learning from our own institutional history of both inclusion and exclusion. So number one, thinking about teaching and learning. So the Center for Engaged Pedagogy, which Lisa talked a little bit about, really is unique in that in most campus colleges, a teaching and learning center is set up to support faculty and grad students teach. At Barnard, the Center for Engaged Pedagogy is really set up to ensure a joint process of teaching and learning, and how that's a very mutually dependent relationship. So it both supports the students and the faculty and how it supports teaching and learning. So they create workshops, facilitate institutes, communities of practice, develop pedagogical scholarship. We have an NSF grant on a computing fellows program that we're doing with the computer science department. We build and sustain relationships, so become a space and a hub for a culture of talking about teaching and learning and bettering teaching and learning, and then providing resources and tools for the campus community. So I just named here on this slide just a few examples of some of that work that is being done. As you know, many students going into the classroom post-pandemic has kind of changed the way that we've learned. And so this year, the Center for Engaged Pedagogy started with tools and strategies for academic engagement at NSOP. And so thinking through, what does it mean not only to learn in a college classroom, but how might that look different? And so I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with things like a hidden curriculum, but making assumptions that students come in and know exactly how a college classroom is going to be run, we know is not the case. And so really helping to ensure students, what does it look like to learn and take notes in a seminar? What does it mean to participate? What are the different forms of doing that? There are also work with faculty. And one of the incredible things about working on a college campus is the best thing about it is we're constantly learning. And we're at the forefront of new knowledge being created. And our faculty here are so committed to learning more, to learning together, to processing together. So we have working groups on climate and how to co-teach and teach interdisciplinary on issues of the climate. So how are we addressing the climate in an environmental humanities class? How is it being addressed in an ecology class? How might that look different? I love to tell the example of taking something like scarcity and abundance. How is that discussed in economics, and how might that be discussed in ecology, and where do we see some of those connections? Also doing working groups around racial equity for departments and chairs of the department. So thinking about capacity building, planning, curriculum, hiring from a racial equity lens. There's also this Friday, March 31st, will be our annual BOLD conference. And this is a conference for Barnard faculty, staff, and students, where faculty, staff, and students across the college submit proposals for teaching and learning to help teach and learn and create spaces for the whole community to get together. So it's a really exciting full day of engagement for all folks at this school. One of our alums who started this will actually be honored in the last session. And then we also do research projects. So one of the ones I love to talk about is the Centering and Burdening Guide, which I think Joanne can put in the chat, which was an example in which as anti-racist pedagogy, anti-racist teaching and learning was cropping up across the country, different practices were suggested. One of the practices suggested was to provide students of color the space in classes to tell their own story, to tell their own lived experience. And so one of the things that became clear to the CEP was that while that is a great practice, oftentimes it can be a burden. It can put a burden on a student of color to be part of the curriculum, to have to explain their story. So a group of students got together under the leadership of my colleague, Alex Pittman, and put together a community of practice to think through what did it mean to center/burden students of color in classrooms. And they've put together a beautiful guide that I think Joanne can share that is shared in workshops amongst faculty in ways to kind of engage across students and faculty. One of the newer research projects they're working on now is a dialogue without consensus. So thinking through, how do we move beyond a polarization? How do we actually have real dialogue in classes in ways that do not offend, do not sound like echo chambers, really, really intentional. Another hot topic, as you can imagine, is thinking about generative AI or ChatGPT and the effects of that on the college classroom. Another academic project that I'm a part of is our Committee on Freedom of Expression. So Provost Bell and I are co-leading a committee of tenured faculty on thinking through how we want to put a statement together on academic freedom and freedom of expression here at Barnard. And I think this is a really special moment where Barnard is saying we do not see DEI and teaching and learning, or academics or research, as two separate things. We see them together. We see them supporting each other. And so really this is a conversation that is had between these two spaces. And so it's really been such a privilege to be in a room with such experts thinking through what it means for Barnard's mission, Barnard's identity, to exercise academic freedom, and how we put together a statement that supports our community and the pursuit of knowledge here at Barnard. The next thing I want to talk about is moving beyond the classroom to the climate as a whole. So thinking about, what does it mean to belong on this campus? What does it mean to feel valued, to have agency, to know that you matter? And so I love to pull up President Bylock's quote from March of last year when I took on this job, which is to say that an inclusive community is built by everybody. For this to be a great community, we have to work together. We are all accountable to one another. And so to spearhead that work and to help kind of think about that work strategically, we have a couple of ways in which that happens. We have, I lead a DEI cabinet, a DEI council, and a community safety group. And within these spaces, we get folks from across the campus to come together and to talk about what this means in their area. How can communication talk to financial aid, talk to our student government? How might putting these pieces together help us do this work in a really sustained way, and not one fragile project here, one fragile project here? And so we're thinking through kind of that kind of work, which I can share in more detail during the Q&A if folks have questions. We also, through the community safety group, we've put together a climate survey that comes out of USC's Racial Equity Center, that other liberal arts colleges go through to think through, like, what does the racial climate look like on our college according to our students, 1, our faculty, 2, and staff, 3. And so every year we do a different group. So we did students, then we did staff. This coming year, we'll do faculty. We put the reports together. We have big campus conversations about what they mean, what we learn, and what recommendations and actions we want to make to move forward based off of this. The other thing that we get to do, and to kind of ensure that this work is happening across the campus and that we're harnessing the brilliance that comes out of our faculty, students, and staff, is to request proposals through grants, and really getting faculty, staff, and students engaged in this work and feeling like they have the capacity and the support to carry it through. So I could spend, I think, the entire hour just walking through the different creative projects I have been fortunate to witness since taking on this role, but I thought I would just give you a few sample. So the Barnard Inclusion Grant comes out of our council. This is open to faculty, staff, and students, and it's decided upon by faculty, staff, students, alums who are part of this group. And so one example would be the Deaf Awareness. During Deaf Awareness Week in September, Columbia University and Barnard College's Sign Language Club put together an array of events for folks, from a film screening to sign language workshops to bringing in faculty from the Med campus to talk about hearing devices and the latest trends in sciences in that work. So really trying to complicate the conversation of what it means to have a week on deaf awareness and how we can be deaf advocates. Between the provost office and DEI, we also have a fund for innovation of teaching grants. And so this goes out to all faculty, and they can propose projects that take place co-curricularly or curricularly across their work. And so I've listed on this slide a group of, you can see a plethora of different departments and programs that have put forward grants and projects. Very different creative projects. I can't help but always use the Professor Snow, Jessica Goldstein example, because I love it so much. But during the pandemic, they could no longer have intro biology labs in person because everybody was virtual. And so what they created were discussion sections instead of the virtual lab. And in those discussion sections, they were talking about the connection between social difference and biology. They were trying to contextualize biology within our society. And those proved to be very popular. So, the next year we're back in person, labs are back on, and the students were very impressed. The evaluations were great. The faculty were invested. And so they figured out how to take an introductory bio class that was just a bio in a lab and also incorporate these discussion sections. And so they proposed a grant to help think through what this would look like, to help assess it, and to help train how these faculty could facilitate these complicated conversations. And again, we've seen great strides in the evaluation here. Another project, Professor Alex Watson is in the first year writing program, created a website. We can share the link. And really a huge experience where trying to cite and name our Black Barnard faculty. What is the research they're doing? How do we support it? How do we teach it in our classes? How do we engage in conversation across our faculty? And so through the website, you'll see various initiatives that have been created based off of this first initiative from this professor. The next thing I want to talk about is studying now in our campus programming. So the studying now idea actually came out of a conversation between President Bylock and I right about the moment I was moving into this role when Russia was invading Ukraine. It wasn't even a full war yet. And we knew we had experts on this campus and part of our community who could talk about this, could unpack it in ways that we didn't understand and could do it now, immediately. And so we hosted our very first Study Now webinar. We had a faculty member and a trustee in conversation with President Bylock. We invited all faculty, staff, students, alums, parents, and I think we had over 1,000 people. I think we gave people 3 days notice, and like over the weekend, we had 1,000 people registered. And so we realized how fortunate we are to be at a college campus, part of the Columbia community, with all these experts right here next door. So we from then we created another one. We did this around when the Dobbs decision came out. And then this January, we did one around anti-Semitism and anti-Blackness, as we've seen the numbers heighten in terms of anti-Semitism happening in this country, as well as anti-Blackness. And so we were able to put together another one of these. These are open, they're co-curricular, they're for everybody in our community. And so we imagine we will continue to do these types of programming that again happen when immediate issues come up, and they can help us unpack and start the conversation. We have a lot of other programming that takes place. For example, we do a Grace Lee Boggs lecture. That's the picture there. We have an accessibility week that we just had last week. And in November, we do a trans awareness week. I've just named for you just some of the events we've been doing pretty much from, I think, January, just this semester, from January through June. You'll notice here there's a large list of different types of events and for different people, from employee resource groups for staff to a Lunar New Year wish wall for students. Two things I just wanted to highlight. One is that the Black Liberation Seder took place for students 2 days ago, or yesterday. It was yesterday, Tuesday, and it was incredible. It was a full house. We had a wonderful conversation, and it was actually filmed by PBS, and so it will be featured, I think, in May. Joanne is going to help put the link in the chat in case you are interested in seeing that piece. But it was really wonderful because this was started as a partnership between our office and SGA. And right before this meeting, I met with the SGA rep, and they were telling me that BOSS, the BOSS executive, one of the executive reps from BOSS was at the Seder and decided that BOSS would work on ensuring that this took place next year as well. So we're really seeing some of this work start to get folded into the different programs and organizations here on campus. The other thing I wanted to highlight is there will be a film screening on Monday, the U.S. and the Holocaust from our alum. And so I recommend if anyone is in town and available on Monday to stop on by. The link in the chat for registration is there as well. The next area, the fourth area I want to talk about is community engagement. And this is a really exciting office that has just recently been built and is still in its infancy. And so really thinking about kind of how are we in and of New York? What does that mean for us? And how do we think about New York as being central to our education? And how do we think about ourselves as partners with organizations and neighbors in our area, both locally and globally, I would say. So the way that this has been organized is to think through the steps in which we can do this work. So how do we do exposure work? How do we help connect CEI through CEI faculty, staff, and students to partners, sustained partnerships we've had for a long time, and what is the work that needs to be done to get there and to maintain and sustain those partnerships. I wanted to show an example of one of our current programs right now. I'm going to stop my slides and let them show a quick video of our STEAM in the City program, and then I will start back up.
I need to find ways of making my children, my students, more interested in science, get them more excited about it. So I was like, let me get myself excited with this STEAM in the City, and let me see what comes out of it so I can bring it back to the classroom.
STEAM in the City is a program with Barnard College, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, and the Office of Community Engagement and Inclusion, which provides an opportunity for teachers in Harlem, K-8, to learn about STEAM curriculum and experiential learning.
I'm excited about getting to talk about how we can re-engage with our community right now with STEAM curriculum. We are identifying the trees and we are measuring the carbon dioxide levels. It relates to the curriculum that I'm teaching, and it actually allows students to have real-life application of the knowledge that they learn in the classroom to apply it to studies around their neighborhood and their park.
You can learn so much in a park like this. Partnering with Barnard, it's bringing kids from local schools and teachers from local schools in together to learn about this natural resource that we have right in our midst.
A lot of teachers don't have the chance to necessarily be creative in the classroom, and coming to something like this where they get to use a space like the Design Center where it's kind of sky's the limit for what you want to create is really inspiring, and it kind of brings them back to when they were kids.
This inspires me as a teacher to get students to think outside the box. This would help me a lot because this would be a space that I can come in and practice a little bit before I take it to the kids, or I can just ask more about how to use different machines, and I understand now that the staff is here to learn about all of this cool stuff.
I want the teachers to learn a little bit about the amazing biology of honeybees, but I also want them to come away with an appreciation for how important honeybees and other bee species are for both our agricultural system, but also natural ecosystems.
It's so awesome to be up here on the roof with all these bees. A lot of my students are bugged out by bees, so I think by learning about this, it's going to help them have less of a fear, and we can learn more about our ecosystem.
This is great just to learn about bees. Hopefully I can actually make an affiliation and have possibly a beehive near my school so we can actually study them.
My students are going to get a better teacher out of this experience that I had. The actual hands-on experiential learning just opened my eyes to so many more things that I can do with my students outside of the classroom.
I'll be more like a facilitator in the classroom, and I'm excited to see what that looks like.
Okay, so I hope everybody enjoyed that video. One of the other projects I would like to share with you all is Undesign the Red Line. This is a huge, thoughtful initiative that came out of community engagement and inclusion, but also came out of a lot of different partners on this campus, the library, different faculty and staff, and a lot of our community partners. We put together a working group that included all of those stakeholders and put together an exhibition on undesigning the red line, meaning looking at New York looking at the red line, looking at the history of the red line, mapping the red line, and what it meant in terms of housing justice and how that then inequities in housing, and then how that then affected health and wellness and schooling in New York at large. And so this exhibit was put together. This exhibit is running right now. There are tours happening on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, where you can come get this tour. We've had state senators, we've had council members, we've had school teachers. We have had a workshop put together, like a week-long workshop of faculty brainstorming how to integrate this into classes, from theater to education to urban studies, to figure out how we can use this as a tool in our teaching, and what this means for our relationship with the city. And so I love using this example, one, because it's still there and I think everyone should go visit. But I also think that this is a great example of where the CEP was like, hey, let's help faculty think about how to incorporate this into their work. And we see faculty that are like, hey, how can I use this resource so that I can teach what I'm teaching or connect to other faculty doing this work? And then we see community members wanting to figure out how they can coordinate it into their work. And then I also think it helps us think about our own history. What is the relationship to Columbia and Barnard and redlining and geography and housing in this city? And so the next thing I wanted to jump to was thinking about learning our own history. For those of you that know, that's Professor Quandra Prettyman, who is our first African-American literature professor at Barnard, who recently passed away. But one of the projects that we have been doing a lot in DEI is to work with archives and faculty and students to think through how we might want to excavate some of our histories and some of our contemporary realities for preservation. So we can think about how this affects how we learn together and how we create communities of inclusion and exclusion here at Barnard. And so the project, I am very excited. I was joking with someone earlier. I was like, I would call this, as someone who has a PhD in media studies, this is like the blockbuster project. I have been working very closely with Professor Miller in the English and Africana Studies Department. We've been charged by President Bylock to start the Zora Neale Hurston Centennial Committee. Zora Neale Hurston was the first Black student to graduate from Barnard, and both her matriculation and her graduation centennials are coming up. And so to prepare for that, we've put together a committee that includes alums, trustees, faculty, staff, and students to propose a plan for how we want to celebrate, examine, interrogate this for those 3 years, and also how we can create infrastructure so that this gets remembered, it gets taught, and it advances the institution as we think about our work. I'm not sure how familiar many of you are with Zora Neale Hurston's work. She's known for her literature. She's also an incredible anthropologist. And really, a lot of the anthropology work that she did in her day is now seminal, was ahead of its day at the time, and is now so pivotal to the work and the ways that anthropologists work today. So thinking about not just her work, but the ways in which she does this interdisciplinary study that just emphasizes kind of the liberal arts environment that we have here on this campus. And so we've been really excited about this work. And I thought I could end by trying to advertise the fact that if you will be here for reunion on Friday, June 2nd, Professor Miller and I will assign a couple short readings and host a conversation about her work, the work of this committee, and how we'd really like to continue this conversation on Zora Neale Hurston, on institutional learning, and how it's really integral to the learning that takes place at our college. So with that, I will stop sharing and answer any questions you may have. So I will start with a question that I received before I got here, which I appreciated, somebody sent in. So one of them was thinking about some of the anti-Semitism work that we're doing here on this campus. And so I just I named some of the events, some of the programming that we've been doing. But there's more work too. There's infrastructural, there's capacity work that is being done as well. So for example, our dining services has had a focus group of kosher students since the start of the year. And they've been working together on thinking about the kosher meals and how that meal takes place on this campus. And so it was a really sweet, the students, there's still work to be done, but the students were so excited that at the winter holidays, they gave the staff gift cards as thank yous because we were able to see kind of some of the change in that work. So that's some of the work that's being done. There is continued learning taking place. So both the dean of the college and I are going to Israel this summer with different organizations on thinking through this work. There's also work that is being done and thinking about how we support acknowledgement and learning around the holidays. So Dean Greenidge and I sent out an email about the high holidays at the beginning of the semester, both to explain the dining options and the accommodations, and to give a little history on what these holidays mean and how they are understood very differently. We did the same thing this past spring for Ramadan and Passover as well. And really trying to support our community in understanding and knowing that the accommodations are there for them to celebrate and to practice as they want. So these are just some of the examples of some of the work that is being done in addition to some of the programming that I have named. There's also a lot of the work the Center for Engaged Pedagogy does in teaching and learning is supporting faculty and students on supporting people coming from different backgrounds and different ways of thinking and different support systems and how to have those conversations in really thoughtful, facilitated ways. And so we see that across different identities and backgrounds as well. Let me see what other questions. I had a good question before too around somebody asked if the Holocaust film and panel will be virtual. I think you have to be in person for that. I do not think there's a virtual option, but somebody in the chat can answer if that is not the case. I had another great question around strategic planning for DEI and had I started that since I took on this job. And so I just wanted to share that a little bit of history about it. So the DEI task force, I think it was 2017 before I got here, came together and proposed a number of initiatives for the college. This was faculty, staff, students, alums, I think, came together and proposed. President Bylock took those suggestions and really put a lot of them into action, one of them being my role. So this role came out of that, as well as the DEI commitments that my predecessor, Dr. Ariana Stokas-Gonzalez, created on her website. So you can see those commitments there. And so we're really ensured that all the work that we're doing exists within those commitments and within the DEI mission that was set by that task force in 2017. What I've been doing with the council this year is starting to do what I refer to as logic models. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with that, but what I'd like to see is that everybody from their different spheres of influence on this campus, so whether you're a student in student government or you're the executive director of financial aid, or your development and alumni relations, to think through what is your DEI goal or your DEI goals. What are the challenges that you have in carrying those out? What are the resources and support you have in carrying those out? What are the activities you're doing? What are the outcomes that you're hoping for? How are they assessed? And what I'm hoping to do is if everybody in the college can do this, and they can put this together, we then as an office can integrate that. And we can say, you know what, this area needs a little more capacity. They're running a lot of programs and they're doing a lot of activities, but they don't have the support they need to carry this out. Or this group is doing a lot of programs, but they're not necessarily getting at the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve. And how can we help them there? The other hope with doing this type of work is that we can find places where we may need to provide the scaffolding and the sustained support so that these things don't fall short or they don't stop and start, but that really feels like, oh, communications can help with this Accessibility Week by getting the information about Accessibility Week out. We can connect folks to admissions when they might have questions if they've seen something on our website. So really trying to find those connections in those channels. Once we have that done, once we have a good sense of what is happening on this campus in that way, then hope with the leadership of our new president, we could start to review what we have done for the last 5 years and where we want to go from there. I'm going back to my sheet to see about the questions that have been asked, and see what else I could answer. What about, one of the questions was around disability. So this is fresh on my mind because last week was Accessibility Week. Accessibility Week was actually started by our Dean Holly Tedder when she was running our Center for Accessibility and Resources, our CARDS, our Center for Accessibility, and myself when I was starting as the director for Center for Engaged Pedagogy. The two of us decided we needed to create more of an effort around thinking about disability justice, accommodations and what it meant in a cultural way, not in a this is required federal mandate requirement way, but how could we incentivize and support this community and really thinking about being as accessible as possible. And so we started the week right before, as you can imagine, March of 2020, like the pandemic hit. This is our 3rd year of pulling this off, and it has now moved to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council and thinking about this week. And so what we've really started to see is kind of how do we integrate this into the college as a whole? And so Joanne in my office and I were laughing. We're like, I don't know if we need a week anymore. And then we finished the week and we're like, no, we still need a week. Because what the week does is it creates the visibility of this. It names it. We have beautiful banners outside of Barnard Hall right now that says it's Accessibility Week. We've had events, we've brought in keynote speakers to talk about these events, but what we've also done is we've created some workshops. So we had a workshop around disability justice for staff and faculty to think through, what does that mean? What is the content there? How do I talk about it in what ways? So that was the first session. Completely voluntary. We had a packed room. The second session was, now how do we incorporate it into our jobs? So if I'm a development, if I come from development alumni relations, if I come from a science lab, how do I think about incorporating it in my own work? And so we put into practice what this looks like. We also had a session for students and thinking about disability justice. And as I said, I was just talking to an SGA student right before this. And they were telling me that they now want to add that into their leadership training for every year for all student organizations. So we're starting to see how this type of work gets integrated into the work of the college as a whole. And so these are some of the things we've been doing around accessibility and disability justice. We have the CARDS has been working very closely with faculty, CARDS and CEP very closely with faculty and students as well, and trying to support this campus in ways to thinking about it more accessibly. We've had conversations with our facilities and operations, especially as new buildings are being planned, and thinking about what that means for accessibility as well. Okay, let me go back to my question sheet. So I had a question about what is the platform for inviting potentially divisive speakers? I assume we want to have some discussions that are perhaps uncomfortable. And I think that's a great question. I mean, I think in work that we've been talking a lot about in our our academic freedom committee is thinking about what does it mean to bring a guest speaker to campus? What kind of research do you want to do ahead of time? And how is it connected and integrated? into the work of the faculty member that might be bringing them, the series that might take place, or the student organization. Who is the speaker and why might you bring them? And so we've been talking a lot about that. I mean, and I think I will be one of the first people to say learning is uncomfortable. I think it should be uncomfortable. I do hope that when guest speakers are brought to this campus, they are done so in good faith, not to be provocative, but for the sake of learning. I had a student ask me once, like, what makes a successful event? And I always say, like, it's okay if there's one person there. Wonderful if there are 500 plus people there. But at the end of the day, a successful event is an event for me that has people wanting to learn more. That if you walk away from an event and you want to go read that person's book, you want to even Wikipedia, what's something that you learned during that event, to me, that's a successful event. And that really should be our goal in all of the work we're doing, in any speaker we bring, in all the work. When I talk to faculty, the question I always ask when they think about, bringing in something that might be controversial or uncomfortable is, what is the pedagogical rationale? What is the reason for teaching and learning that this is being brought up? And if you have a good one, which 99.9% of the time there is, then it's how do we strategize and facilitate this in the best, most thoughtful way we can. Going back to my questions. Somebody asked about restructuring core curriculum in the light of DEI. We are not restructuring any of the core curriculum. In the college as a whole, I will say foundations, which is the general education requirement that takes place here at the college, which is very open. It just asks that students take various modes of thinking courses. So one on thinking globally, one on thinking locally, one on thinking about social difference. That is going through an academic review right now. So a group of faculty are assessing that. Again, a full group of faculty to think through, is the foundations curriculum doing the learning that it sets out to do? Are there things that we might want to change about it at this moment? Are there not? Do we continue to run it in the way that we're running? And so it's been a very incredible process. I think many people, alums have been surveyed on very recent alums have been surveyed on their experience with foundations and the impact of that curriculum on their experience, as have students and as have faculty. I'm looking at the questions. I had a question about access staff at the dorms and how we are inclusive. We've been working, one of the newer initiatives that our office has started is putting together a series of optional workshops for folks on this campus who are union staff. So thinking about access attendants, thinking about staff in the dining hall, putting together a series of different workshops. And the reasons we're doing is they're asking for it. People are asking questions. They're engaging on a regular basis with students and faculty and staff. And so we have 4 different sessions that we're going to pilot this summer. We're really excited about that and thinking about what does it mean to be an ally? How do we think about gender inclusion? How do we think about anti-racism? And how do we incorporate this into our own work? And so again, we're none of this is required so much as trying to create the space of this, like I say, this incentive of folks really being committed to having an inclusive and supportive campus community. And we really have seen, like I said, people are asking. So that's really, really exciting and really encouraging. Okay, I'm going to see if we have more questions. One of the questions I got is how many Barnard administrators have DEI as their primary responsibility? And I would say very few. My office is me and Joanne, who's been putting the wonderful things in the chat. And we have an administrator in our office. But really what we are trying to do is think through how we can help harness and elevate the brilliant work of everyone and how we incorporate it into all parts of the college. And so that's really kind of the focus of our work, is really thinking about where it is being done, how it is being done well, how we showcase and share it, and then how we might support it in ways to connect it across the campus. And it looks like I received a question through the chat, which is thinking about the work through alums. I have so many thoughts, and I would love to be able to do more work on that. One of the I reached out to Development Alumni Relations and said, hey, can we do this thing on Zora Neale Hurston during reunion week? And they were overjoyed with this. And that's how we set up the session for reunion week. I have other ideas. I would love to if alum circles are happening on campus, do tours of the Undesign exhibit. Maybe even during reunion week, we could have Mary, our Engaged Scholar director, come and do something like that. I would be happy to come talk to different groups. I've said to ABC board, I would love to, our professor Alex Watson, who does the Cite Black Barnard page. She hosts a salon where people read some of the work by faculty and annotate it live. I think that would be a really fun event to do with alums. I think there are lots of different ways that we can think about how we could see the connections taking place. I had a student just reach out and she is planning through us at our student government, Bold, Black, and Beautiful at Barnard. And she's hoping to get letters from Black alums to talk about their experience and their advice for students so that she can share that with current students. Any of these ways that we think we can connect these experiences to our students and to our faculty research, we would be more than happy to partner on. Anything? One more. Let's do one last question. We have 5 more minutes. The relationship with Columbia. So we have a great relationship with Columbia, and the work is often in conversation. Right now, I sit on an HBCU task force that is being led across the street, and really that is bringing together folks from across the different schools in Columbia to think together about how we can think about our resources and our support and how we might want to partner with HBCUs. And so at Barnard, we have the wonderful experience where we do a student exchange with Spelman, and that is something that we can showcase. We also can brainstorm different ways that we could imagine something like the Harlem semester. What could that look like over the summer in partnership with HBCUs? What might we think about with Zora Neale Hurston in partnership with HBCUs? So that's been a really fun project. The other project that I'm excited about to take place tomorrow actually is we are hosting faculty from Teachers College and Columbia and Barnard in the James Room for a large conversation on thinking about engaged scholarship. So what do when we think about teaching and research that has public impact, what does that look like? And how do we do that? And how do we support that work? So we're going to have a panel of expert scholars talk. It will be led by the Vice Provost for the Fourth Purpose and Strategic Impact, Sam Sia at Columbia. And then we're going to get into roundtable conversations about this work. And again, this is coming out of kind of that combination from the Provost Academic Wing of Research and our Community Engagement Office of thinking about public impact and how we connect that to research. So so, like I said, doing work with and across the street has been really wonderful, and it makes us unique in our space at Barnard, and in our relationship in New York and part of the Columbia family. So I think I have a couple more minutes, maybe just one last question. I had an interesting question about, are you considering social events that create spaces that are inclusive of all levels of socioeconomic status? Students who are able to attend Barnard can't always keep up socially or economically. Absolutely. I think that's a really great question. And I think it became more, it was easier to name, and it became more obvious after the pandemic, that, certain people were able to live off campus, could bring their aid off campus. People are starting to do events again to go off campus. So we've been working on doing some programming, especially in partnership with Access Barnard, who work with first gen and low income students in providing not only just the conditions to have the textbooks and be able to learn in the class, but to learn in and of New York. So for example, we took a huge group of students to Broadway last spring. We're hoping to do another theatrical performance this spring, because that is part of the learning experience. And we do want to ensure that all of our students have the space to do that. And so this is something that we think about a lot, and we try to be really thoughtful, not just about the conditions to live and to learn, but really experience that college life. And so I appreciate that question, and we've been really thinking a lot about that. Okay, so one more minute left. I have to end by just thanking absolutely everybody who put this event together. I would love to thank Sally and Debbie and Maya and Catherine from Development and Alumni Relations. I would love to thank Lisa Ye for the wonderful introduction and support of this. I would love to thank Joanne Degadillo, my chief of staff, who's been helping with all of the links and all the work that has taken place here, if not lead some of it. And I wish everybody a wonderful Wednesday and a great spring. So thank you very much, and goodbye.